Here's the corrected and polished version of your story, with spelling errors fixed, punctuation added, and character names changed. I've kept the structure and content exactly as provided, only making the requested adjustments. The main characters have been renamed as follows. The narrator is now James, his wife Liv is now Emma, and Karen is now Linda. Other minor characters have also been adjusted for consistency. It started like any other lazy Sunday. My wife, Emma, was sipping her lemon ginger tea. I was half reading the paper and half watching a squirrel try to rob our bird feeder when an unmarked black van screeched to a stop in front of our house. Like it was in a Michael Bay movie. 3 guys in tactical vests jumped out yelling, "HOA compliance enforcement," as they stormed up the driveway. Before I could even say, "What in the neighborhood hell?" they grabbed Emma off our porch swing and dragged her across the lawn, tea mug still in hand. But here's the part that chilled me to the bone. She didn't scream, she didn't fight, she just looked at me, dead calm, and winked. That's when I realized I had no idea who I'd really married. Rewind just a bit. Our neighborhood, Pine Grove Estates, is the kind of place where people argue over mailbox colors and organize bake sales with military-level precision. Our local HOA, led by a woman named Linda, yes, that's really her name, has long treated the neighborhood like her personal dictatorship. She once fined us $75 for porch clutter because our dog left a toy on the step. Another time, she demanded we tone down our laughter levels during a barbecue. I wish I were kidding. We always thought it was just harmless power-tripping, annoying, sure, but manageable. My wife, Emma, mostly ignored the HOA antics. She was a calm, grounded woman with a green thumb, a mysterious past she called just boring office jobs, and an uncanny ability to fix anything electronic in under 2 minutes. She ran a yoga class for the neighbors and grew heirloom tomatoes like she was born in a greenhouse. She also never got rattled, not when the power went out, not when a raccoon tried to steal her flip-flop, and apparently not even when she was dragged into a van by rogue men pretending to be HOA cops. The second the van doors slammed shut and sped off, I kicked into panic mode. I called the police. The dispatcher listened calmly as I described the kidnapping, but when I mentioned the words HOA enforcement, her tone shifted. "Sir," she said carefully, "we've had reports about impersonators operating in your area. I need you to stay where you are." "What does that mean?" I snapped. "I mean, don't follow them, and don't touch anything. Officers are on the way now." I was sweating. Impersonators? What kind of HOA hires muscle to snatch people from porches? I was still replaying Emma's eerie calmness in my mind, that wink. It wasn't scared, it wasn't desperate, it was premeditated, like she wanted to be taken. But why? Well, I rushed back inside and grabbed my phone to try calling her straight to voicemail. I texted nothing. Then I noticed a blinking notification on the corner of our smart home hub, one I'd never seen before. It simply read, "Pine Protocol activated." I tapped it. A hidden panel slid open behind the bookshelf in our study. I swear I nearly threw my back out jumping away from it. Inside was a steel case, biometric lock already open. There was a slim laptop, a small black phone, and a folded envelope with my name, James, in Emma's handwriting. My hands were shaking. I opened the letter first. "If you're reading this," it began, "I've been taken. Don't panic. This is part of the plan." Part of the plan? I wasn't even part of the plan. The letter continued. "I know this will be a shock, but I work for the CIA. Technically, I was retired, but Pine Grove is part of an ongoing investigation. The HOA is involved in something bigger than you can imagine. I'll explain everything soon, but for now, trust no one, especially Linda." I dropped the letter. My knees went weak. I had just learned 2 completely unhinged things. My wife was a CIA agent, and the HOA wasn't just full of nosy busybodies, it was potentially a front for some kind of operation. I turned to the laptop and powered it on. It booted instantly into a secure CIA portal. No login required, it had facial recognition, apparently keyed to me. A file opened on its own, labeled Operation HOA Net. I didn't even want to know why they gave it such a stupid code name, but I clicked through the files anyway. There were surveillance videos, maps of our neighborhood with red pins, and dossiers on all the HOA board members. Linda's file was the thickest pages of financial transactions, travel logs to suspicious locations, and a weird invoice that showed payment to a private enforcement contractor. That had to be the fake cops. I flipped through to see that the so-called HOA compliance officers were actually part of a mercenary security group based out of Nevada. Their website looked legit, if you ignored the fact that they didn't list any clients, reviews, or even a contact number. That's when I noticed the second file on the desktop, Contingency Plan, Suburban Lockdown. The moment I clicked on it, a live satellite feed popped up, centered on our neighborhood. I could see the black van turning down a wooded access road behind the clubhouse, one that the HOA had recently closed off for renovations. I grabbed the black phone and followed Emma's instructions from the letter. Call this number if anything goes wrong. I did. It rang once. Then a voice answered. Mr. Granger? Yes. Who is this? This is Mallory. I'm with Emma's unit. She's safe for now. We've been tracking her. I'll send help. Wait, what the hell is going on? Why is the HOA kidnapping people? They're not just an HOA, Mallory said darkly. Linda isn't who she says she is. She's under deep surveillance for laundering money through suburban developments and might be connected to a foreign influence ring. Your wife volunteered to go undercover here. This whole community is a front. My mouth was so dry I could barely speak. What do? I croaked. Stay put. Backup is en route. And whatever you do, don't let anyone from the HOA near your house. Then she hung up. I turned around slowly, and there was Linda, standing on my front lawn, hands clasped politely, smile like a shark, and two of her fake officers just behind her. Mr. Granger, she called sweetly, we need to talk about your wife's recent violations. She wasn't there to talk, and I knew it. That's when I realized this wasn't about porch clutter anymore. This was war. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Linda stood in my yard like she owned it, wearing her signature lavender blouse, clutching a thick HOA binder like it was the Constitution. Behind her, two of the same fake officers who just abducted my wife adjusted their knockoff tactical gear, trying to look menacing. But I could tell their patches were crooked, and one of them had a Nerf dart stuck to his boot. It would have been funny if I weren't so sure they were armed. I forced a smile and waved from the window like a confused husband who had no idea his wife was being held in a suburban bunker. Linda gave me a tight little nod, and then, thankfully, turned around and walked away, the fake officers trailing her like bad cosplay. As soon as they were out of sight, I locked every door in the house and closed the blinds. My brain was running hot. I paced back and forth, rereading Emma's letter, as if it would suddenly make more sense. CIA? Linda tied to foreign influence? A quiet little neighborhood a front for some kind of laundering operation. And my wife, my lemon ginger tea drinking, yoga-loving wife, was in the middle of all of it. Actually, she wasn't just in the middle, she was running it, undercover, like she was Jason Bourne with better manners. Back at the hidden terminal, I scrolled through the files again. The Operation HOA net document included a timeline of the mission. Emma had embedded herself as a resident over a year ago, supposedly retiring from active duty, but clearly that retirement was fake. Her target was Linda, real name Lena Vov, born in Moldova, came to the States on a student visa, stayed under a false identity, and gradually inserted herself into various HOAs across the country. Each time, the pattern was the same. She'd rise to power, make aggressive changes, and start filtering money through fake fines and shell contractor invoices. The money trail was dense, snaking from neighborhood fees to landscaping companies that didn't exist, then off into offshore accounts. I couldn't believe it. Our HOA dues were funding international crime, and I'd complained about the pool not having enough umbrellas. But what shook me most was that Emma had kept this from me so perfectly. I mean, she'd lived here with me for over a year, slept beside me, we'd hosted movie nights, gone camping, she never slipped. Not once. That calmness, when she was taken, it wasn't just bravery, it was control. She knew exactly what she was doing. The phone buzzed again, a new message from the secure line. Help is in the neighborhood. Don't engage unless you're forced. Look for signs. They're watching too. I stepped onto the back porch and scanned the yard. Everything looked normal. A few birds, our old hammock swaying in the breeze. Then I noticed something weird. Our neighbor, Miss S. Harper, was watering her plants in the same pattern, watering the same bush. then the next, then circling back. She wasn't gardening, she was signaling. I waved cautiously. She made a quick hand gesture and turned back inside. That night, under the cover of darkness and way too much caffeine, I snuck over to her house. Miss S. Harper opened the door the moment I reached the steps, as if she'd been waiting for me. "Get in," she said. "They're sweeping the neighborhood again in 10 minutes. I slipped inside. Her home looked normal, if your definition of normal included floor-to-ceiling screens showing live feeds of the entire block, a desk covered in encrypted radios, and a file drawer labeled Operation Suburbia, Phase 2. "You?" I whispered. She smirked. "I'm part of Emma's unit. Code name, Rosebud. Don't laugh. We all picked plant names." I didn't laugh, mostly because I was too stunned. She knew this might happen, Rosebud continued, that they'd try something bold before we got full authorization. So when they grabbed her, we activated the fail-safe. "You were step 1. Why me? Because you're the only one she trusted to stay unpredictable. We needed chaos to cover the extraction. You were the wild card." I didn't feel like a wild card. I felt like a guy who just learned his neighbors were all federal agents, and his wife had been lying to him while making homemade granola. "Miss S. Harper, sorry." Rosebud walked me through the plan. The van had taken Emma to the HOA clubhouse, which apparently had a full basement renovated under the guise of storm shelter improvements. She'd allowed herself to be taken because she had planted a GPS beacon in her sandal. Her team was triangulating her location, but they needed someone inside to disable the clubhouse security grid something Emma had secretly wired into our own home system when she built the smart upgrade. She always said she was just really into tech. I muttered, "She is into tech." Rosebud grinned. "She just didn't tell you it was for counterintelligence work." I agreed to help, mostly because I didn't want to sit around drinking chamomile while my wife faced a bunch of rogue HOA mercenaries alone. Rosebud gave me a flash drive with a deactivation virus and instructions. Plug it into the security uplink hidden in the shed behind the clubhouse. Simple enough, except the shed was also where Linda's goons liked to hang out and smoke whatever off-brand cigars they brought in their tactical diaper bags. The next morning, I acted casual, took out the trash, waved at Linda like nothing was wrong. She stared me down like a predator eyeing dinner but didn't approach. The shed was within view from our backyard, so I waited until late afternoon, when the guards wandered off for what looked like an extended taco break. I sprinted across the alley and ducked behind the hedge, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. The shed door was locked, but Emma had taught me how to pick basic locks one night over wine and old spy movies. I figured she thought it was romantic. Now I realized it was training. Inside the shed, I found the uplink panel hidden beneath a fake lawnmower. I jammed in the flash drive, waited for the light to turn green, then bolted. No one saw me, or so I thought. That night, I got a message from Emma, a voice recording sent through the secure channel. "Nice work, babe. They're blind now. Extraction's coming soon. You did good, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything. I'll explain it all when I'm out, I promise." The message cut off with static. I stared at the phone for a long time. My wife was CIA. My neighbor was a covert agent. The HOA was a front for international criminals. And somehow, I'd become part of the mission. It was surreal, but I wasn't scared anymore. If they thought dragging Emma off the porch was going to stop her, they had no idea who they were dealing with. And if they came back for me, well, let's just say I'd hidden more than a few surprises in those smart sprinklers. The next morning, I woke up to a neighborhood that looked exactly the same as it always did: quiet, peaceful, and painfully unaware that it was ground zero for an undercover CIA operation. Kids rode scooters. Someone's dog barked at a mailbox. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and unspoken drama. But I knew the truth now, and everything looked different. Every garden gnome, every fake rock, every for sale sign potential surveillance. The HOA clubhouse, with its stucco walls and pastel banners, didn't look like a criminal fortress, but that was the genius of it. Who would ever suspect that a community spirit center with bingo nights and potlucks was a cover for an international laundering ring? After the previous night's success disabling their security grid, I got another message from Rosebud. The operation is now greenlit. Emma's extraction is scheduled for this evening, and you have a new role. I was to rendezvous with a few other undercover agents' residents. I thought were just weird or overly into lawn care, and help coordinate from inside the clubhouse. The objective was clear. We'd be attending the fake monthly HOA budget meeting, during which Linda would likely be reviewing fake invoices and laundering logs. Our goal was to stall her long enough for Emma's team to breach from below, through the tunnel system they'd mapped months ago. I wasn't sure which part was crazier, the idea of a secret tunnel beneath a yoga studio, or the fact that my wife had planned it all. I met the other agents at dawn, in a garage disguised as a model train workshop. There was Henry, the grumpy old man who always yelled at kids to get off his lawn, turns out. He used to run black ops in Berlin. Then there was Sonia, the overly enthusiastic dog walker who knew 6 languages and could hotwire anything with a fuse. And finally, Paul, our mailman, who, according to Rosebud, had been intercepting suspicious HOA letters for over a year. The whole crew looked like the cast of a sitcom, but apparently they were lethal when needed. I was the newbie, but they welcomed me with quiet nods and a muffin from Paul's thermos lunchbox. CIA muffins were surprisingly good. We reviewed the plan one last time. I'd pose as a concerned homeowner, attending the meeting to protest a made-up fine. Sonia would be seated next to me, armed with a flash grenade hidden in her purse, disguised as a dog treat. Henry would be in the control booth, monitoring internal comms. Paul would stay on the exterior, with eyes on the van we suspected was their escape vehicle. Meanwhile, Emma's team would use the temporary blackout in the security grid to breach the underground passage and reach the basement where she was being held. The entire thing had to happen in under 12 minutes, or the false power reset would kick in and restore surveillance. Walking into that clubhouse was surreal. Linda greeted everyone at the door, all smiles and pearls, her eyes scanning each person like a TSA agent in disguise. When she saw me, she smiled wider, like a cat welcoming a mouse to brunch. She handed me a printed agenda that was so thick it could have been a phone book. "Glad you're taking your civic duties seriously, Mr. Granger," she purred. I gritted my teeth and nodded. "Just want to make sure my lawn doesn't cause international incidents." She laughed, but her eyes narrowed. She knew something was off. The air inside was tense, like the walls themselves knew they were about to be raided. The meeting started like any other fake HOA event, boring, filled with acronyms no one understood, and completely unnecessary PowerPoint slides. Linda droned on about water usage, fence paint uniformity, and a new beautification fee. When I raised my hand to ask why the clubhouse budget included a $14,000 line item for advanced noise management equipment, her smile faltered. "That's for, community concert support," she lied. "In the basement?" I asked. That's when I saw a flash of recognition in her eyes. She knew I knew, but she didn't panic. She adjusted. That was the scary part. Just then, Sonia accidentally dropped her purse first, and as she bent down, her eyes met mine. We were at the 8-minute mark. Emma's team had to be close. Suddenly, there was a loud buzzing noise, probably part of Henry's interference plan to temporarily shut down the clubhouse Wi-Fi. Linda stiffened. "This meeting is adjourned," she said abruptly, and started gathering her papers. Too soon. She made a move toward the side door, but I stepped in front of it. "Leaving so soon?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "You're obstructing HOA procedure," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "And you're laundering money through dead lawn services, Lena Vuv." Her face dropped. That was it, the mask was gone. She signaled to her men, 2 of them in the room, disguised as minute takers. They moved fast, pulling pistols from inside their briefcases. Before they could aim, Sonia threw the dog treat bag across the floor. It exploded in a blinding flash of white and blue light, and chaos erupted. People screamed. Linda bolted for the emergency exit, but Paul, our mailman turned sniper, hit the fire door lock remotely, trapping her inside. And then, like clockwork, a trap door on the stage floor popped open, and Emma rose out of it like an action figure on a mission. She was covered in dirt, breathing heavy, and holding a stun baton. "Did you miss me?" she said to Linda, voice cool and furious. Linda lunged, but Emma dropped her with a quick jolt from the baton and a leg sweep that would have made a UFC fighter jealous. The rest of the HOA thugs either surrendered or ran straight into Paul's net traps outside. Within minutes, federal agents disguised as local landscapers stormed in and began processing the scene. The real police were called, but only after the CIA had taken what they needed. Linda was cuffed, finally speechless, as Emma stood over her. "You should have stuck to fines about garbage bins," she said. The aftermath was a blur. Residents peered from their homes as Linda and her fake team were loaded into black SUVs. No one had any idea what had really happened, only that the HOA had a shakeup. The official story was embezzlement and impersonation charges. The unofficial one, a CIA-led neighborhood extraction that went off with only minor smoke inhalation and one sprained ankle. That night, Emma and I sat on the porch again. The swing creaked, just like it used to. She looked at me with those same calm eyes. "I should have told you," she said softly. "You did," I replied, "in your own weird spy wife way." She laughed, and for the first time in days, it felt like things might actually be normal again. Until, of course, the replacement HOA president showed up at our door the next morning, wearing aviators and carrying a clipboard. The clipboard guy introduced himself as Ted. He wore boat shoes, khakis so crisp they looked ironed by NASA, and a polo shirt with a tiny HOA logo embroidered right over his heart, like a badge of honor. He claimed he was the interim HOA president, appointed by upper HOA management, which was hilarious, because apparently there was now a whole hierarchy of HOA bureaucracy, like it was a Fortune 500 company, and not just a bunch of people obsessed with lawn symmetry. He smiled like someone who practiced it in the mirror, and I could tell right away he wasn't just here to check fence height. He was here to assess the damage not to the neighborhood, but to whatever dark operation Linda had been running. Emma stood behind me as Ted explained that the HOA board would be undergoing restructuring and that they'd be re-evaluating the community standards, which sounded innocuous enough, until he added, particularly concerning homeowner surveillance and protocol adherence. That was the line that tipped it. He wasn't new. He was a replacement cog in the same broken machine, the same game, different face. As soon as he left, Emma pulled me back inside. The house, still technically wired from our previous defensive setup, had picked up a brief radio transmission while Ted had been on our porch. It was encrypted, short, and not from a local police band. Rosebud decoded it 10 minutes later and confirmed what we feared. Ted wasn't an HOA lackey. He was private sector, sent in by one of the shell companies exposed during Linda's takedown. Someone high up had decided Pine Grove was still valuable, and they were sending in a new player to take over the board, clean up the mess, and try to cover what remained of the operation. But this time, they weren't just coming for power, they were coming for revenge. That night, Emma called an emergency meeting, not of the CIA team, but of the actual neighborhood residents, the ones who'd been silently watching their HOA fines rise, who'd gotten letters about grass shade mismatches and holiday decoration overages, the ones who'd lived in fear of Linda and her clipboard cult. She figured if the operation was done and her cover blown, it was time to let the neighborhood in on what had really been happening, or at least a version of it. We met in the backyard under the string lights Emma had always said were just for ambience, but were actually wired with motion sensors and signal boosters. There were about 20 people, neighbors from all walks of life, some old, some new, some who'd kept to themselves until now. Emma stood up on the porch and gave them the cleaned-up version. The HOA had been corrupted, the new guy wasn't legit, and if we didn't push back, we'd be right back where we started, only worse. To my surprise, they didn't panic, they got mad. Old Mr.